I always say my life can be divided into two parts: the days before I met Coco and the days after. Before her, I was just a quiet girl trying to walk through life without making too much noise. After her, I became someone who felt deeply, loved loudly, and understood what companionship truly meant. I still remember the exact moment she came into my world. It was on a hot Sunday afternoon when I wandered into the small animal shelter near my neighborhood. I didn't plan to adopt a dog that day. In fact, I had only gone there because I couldn't stand being in the house anymore. My parents had argued again that morning, loud voices echoing in every room until I felt like the walls were shaking. Their fights always made me feel small, like I was disappearing into the floor. So I left the house and kept walking until I reached the shelter. The moment I stepped inside, I smelled a mixture of soap, old blankets, and something soft, like warm fur. Dogs barked in different tones, some excited, some sad, some tired. I walked down the narrow hallway, glancing at each cage, but my eyes stopped when I reached the last one. Inside sat a tiny brown dog with big round eyes and long floppy ears. She wasn't barking. She wasn't jumping. She just stared at me with the calmest, saddest eyes I had ever seen. It felt like she was looking straight into my heart. I knelt down, pressed my fingers through the bars, and whispered, "Hi." The dog slowly walked toward me and rested her warm nose on my hand. And in that exact moment, something inside me cracked open. It wasn't painful, more like something long locked away had finally been found. The shelter worker walked over and said, "Her name is Coco. She's been here for 3 months. Nobody seems to want her." I looked into Coco's eyes again, and I already knew the truth. I wanted her. I needed her. And maybe in a small, silent way, she needed me too. Within an hour, I was walking out of the shelter with Coco in my arms, her tiny tail wagging against my chest. That was the beginning. Life with Coco was like discovering colors I never knew existed. She followed me everywhere, into the kitchen, into the bathroom, into my bedroom. If I sat on the floor, she curled up on my lap. If I cried, she would place her soft paw on my knee, as if telling me, "I'm here." If I laughed, she wagged her tail so fast her whole body wiggled. I called her my four-legged baby, and she acted exactly like one. Every morning, she would tap her paws on my door until I opened it, then jump onto my bed and lick my face until I finally woke up. At night, she refused to sleep unless she could curl up on my blanket, close enough that I could feel her warm breath. My parents noticed how much happier I seemed. Surprisingly, they welcomed Coco into the family. They still argued sometimes, but less often. Sometimes I wondered if Coco could sense the tension, because whenever voices got louder, she would trot to the middle of the room, sit down, and tilt her head as if confused. Somehow that always made my parents stop and look at her, then at each other. Sometimes I joked, "Coco is the peacekeeper of this house." They would laugh, and it always softened the air. One day, a storm rolled into the city. Heavy rain slammed against the windows, and thunder growled across the sky. Coco, who was usually brave, trembled and pressed herself against me. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, stroking her ears. "It's just a storm." But she kept shaking. I picked her up and held her close, feeling her tiny heartbeat racing against my chest. I didn't expect to feel emotional. but I did. It reminded me of all the nights I had cried alone, shaking at sounds that weren't thunder shouting, slamming doors, broken promises. Later, when the storm finally passed, Coco lifted her head and licked my cheek. It felt like her way of saying thank you, but I think I should have been the one thanking her. Months passed and Coco grew healthier, happier, more playful. Her eyes didn't look sad anymore. They sparkled. Whenever I walked through the door after school, she would run at me full speed, her ears flapping like tiny wings. I always knelt down to catch her. "You missed me, huh?" I would say. She always answered by licking my face wildly. We went everywhere together, from evening walks in the neighborhood to quiet mornings at the park. Sometimes we just sat on the grass, watching other dogs run while Coco leaned against my leg. I talked to her about everything: my fears, my hopes, my dreams, my loneliness. I knew she couldn't speak back, but sometimes the silence was exactly what I needed. Sometimes silence listens better than words. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned soft orange, I told her something I'd never said out loud before. "I felt invisible before you came into my life." Coco lifted her head and looked at me, tail swaying gently. "I'm serious," I whispered. "I didn't think anyone cared about how I felt. But you make me feel like I matter." Coco placed her paw on my leg, and I believed she understood. But life has a way of testing the heart. It happened on a normal morning. Too normal. I woke up, stretched, and waited for Coco to come scratch my door like she always did. But the hallway stayed quiet. I frowned and opened the door. Coco. No tiny paws. No tail wags. No excited little jumps. I found her lying on the kitchen floor, curled up in a tight ball. Her eyes didn't sparkle. They looked dull, tired. When I touched her head gently, she whimpered. My heart dropped. "Mom," I shouted. "Something's wrong with Coco." Within minutes, we were rushing to the vet. I held Coco in my arms the whole ride, whispering, "It's okay, baby. I'm right here. I'm right here." The vet examined her carefully. My hands shook as I waited. My chest felt tight, as if all the air had disappeared from the room. When the vet finally spoke, her voice was calm but serious. "She has an infection. With treatment, she should recover. But she needs to stay with us for a couple of days." I nodded, but tears filled my eyes. A couple of days? Without me? I felt like someone was pulling away a part of my heart. The vet let me sit with Coco for a few minutes before they took her. I stroked her ears gently. "You're going to be okay," I whispered. "I know you're strong. Just get better, okay? I'll be waiting." Coco looked at me weakly, gave one small lick to my hand, and then the vet carried her away. And just like that, I walked out of the clinic with empty arms. The next 2 days were some of the longest of my life. I woke up expecting to hear Coco at my door, only to realize she wasn't there. I sat at the dining table, staring at her empty food bowl. I walked into my room and saw her toys in the corner, untouched. Everything in the house felt too quiet. Without her, the house felt like it had turned gray. I visited her each day, sitting beside her kennel while she rested. The vet said she was slowly improving, but seeing her weak broke something inside me. I wanted to be strong for her, but I cried in the car every time we left the clinic. On the second night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I whispered into the dark. Please don't take her away from me. My voice cracked. I can lose many things, but not her, not my baby. I didn't realize how deep she had woven herself into my heart until I felt the fear of losing her. On the third day, the vet called. She's doing much better, she said. You can take her home today. I didn't even let the vet finish before I burst into tears. Relief washed through me like a warm wave. My mom drove me to the clinic, but I was so excited my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The vet brought Coco out, and the moment she saw me, her tail wagged slow at first, then faster and faster. I knelt down, arms open, and she stumbled into them. I held her tightly, feeling her warm fur press against my chest. You scared me, I whispered, tears running down my cheeks. But you're home now. Coco licked my chin, as if saying, I missed you too. We drove home together, and for the first time in days, the world felt bright again. Life felt even more precious after that. I took care of Coco like she was made of something fragile and priceless. I became more patient, more gentle, more aware of how quickly things could change. Coco healed completely, but something in me changed forever. I learned that love is not about the big moments, it's about all the small ones. The morning cuddles, the quiet walks, the playful barks, the soft breaths at night. Coco wasn't just my dog. She was my comfort, my light, my little piece of happiness in a world that sometimes felt too heavy. One evening, while watching the sunset from our usual spot in the park, I looked at her and thought about everything we'd been through, the lonely days before her, the storm nights, the fear of losing her, the joy of holding her again. I love you, baby, I whispered. Coco tilted her head, then licked my cheek with a playful yip. I laughed softly. I know you love me too. In that moment, I realized something beautiful. Coco didn't just come into my life. She changed it. She taught me that love doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in 4 tiny paws, a wagging tail, and warm eyes that say, you're not alone. And ever since the day I met her in that shelter, I never was.